So just going to do the sharp edges using whipped cream on the cake. So that's the cake we've layered. Okay, so it's been cling wrapped and in the freezer for about 6 hours now. I'm just going to remove the cling wrap. Okay, so this I'm just going to remove and then place it on the cake board, before which we just need to understand there is going to be 2 boards that we have to use specifically for making sharp edges on the whipped cream cake, but it's not the board to board method. So we are just going to have 1 board below as a guideline, because without that board, if you have to make sharp edges with just your own eyeballing and with with a sense that you know that you're not going to go close to the cake and then keep scraping, that will come with practice. But for beginners, if you're going to do it for the first time, you're just going to go with 1 board that will go under the cake, and this is just a single board method that we are going to do, and we need another board. So this one I call it working board. Okay, so this will be like really big because we want the scraper to be touching this board as we work, and this can be like really big, but the size doesn't matter. When at least 4 inches bigger than the size of your cake will be good. Okay, and the other board that I'll be using, this needs to be measured to the size of the cake. Okay, and obviously I have the turntable, and on the turntable I've just added the anti-slip mat, just a bit of it, so it just doesn't move. So as I keep the board here, this is not going to move for me, so I can just turn the turntable and this board will stay in place. Now I have 2 acrylic boards here, 2 of them are a bit of different sizes. Okay, now let me measure one of this board in centimeters. Okay, so now what I have here is 20.1, so we just keep it 20 centimeters, and the other one, you can have the board with a hole or without hole. For a single tier cake it doesn't matter, but I obviously buy the boards with the holes in the middle, because I don't know which size I would be using for stacking the cake, and if this cake goes in the middle of a tiered cake, then I would need a hole in the center, so I want to insert the center double. Okay, now I'm measuring this comes to about 21 centimeters. Okay, now let me just measure the cake I have layered. See, there are certain places which is just 19, and then the certain places which is again 19. So I am looking at about just the cake, I am not going to go all the way till the OHB sheet. So it's a 19. I am just looking for about 1 centimeter bigger sized board. So this one was 21, but the cake was 19, right? So now this will determine how much thick my frosting is going to be on the sides. This will be 20. So my cake in most places is just about 19. So I'm just going to choose this board. Now the choice between this board and this board, this I will be very safe that my sides are just going to have enough frosting that the crumbs are not going to show at all. But then because it is bigger, it's going to use up extra whipping cream, and but if you think that having that much extra as a practice, if you're doing it for the first say 5 to 6 times, you could just be safe and use a bit bigger board, so your sides are just going to be super clean and neat. Now after which you can't be having like too much whipping cream just because of the size of the board. You can't be having like a lot of whipping cream, and that adds up to the weight of the cake as well. So slowly you just move on to the board that is 1 centimeter bigger. So we start with 2 centimeter bigger, especially for the whipped cream cake, and move on to, slowly after practice, move on to a board that will be 1 centimeter bigger only. Okay, so I have the blue colored whipping cream I just made. Let me just soften this up. So it's been lying down for some time. Obviously it's going to get dried up. You just need to soften up before you're just about to use it. Okay, so I'm just going to take just a bit here for this board to go on, and you want something that sticks. This board which is measured to the size of the cake, like 1 centimeter bigger in diameter to the diameter of the cake, and that is the working board. Okay, so I'm just going to place this in the middle and then just shake it up a bit so it just stays in place. Okay, now I'm just going to lift this out and remove this cling wrap. Just going to place this in the middle of the white colored board that I am just using. Okay, so now I am just going to remove the OHP sheet. So that's the sugar syrup that's used in the layers. I'm just going to open the OHP sheet. So you could just reuse the OHP sheet, you can just wash it and then use it up again. Okay, now so the steps till here are clear. We have just placed the layered cake over a board which is 1 centimeter bigger in diameter than the diameter of the cake. Okay, and then you have a bigger working board here that's placed on the turntable. Okay, now before we start, we just have one test to do. I call it scraper test. So you guys will also be doing the scraper test and then show me how it goes, like take a video and then show me how it goes. So I have a scraper here, and then this scraper you just need to tap on the working board. Okay, and all the time you just need to make sure the bottom of the scraper touches the working board, and you will never lift the scraper at an angle in any direction at all, or even fully up, not even a bit. So putting this scraper on the working board and then go and hit the board at the bottom, the other one. So all the time this bottom end will be touching the sides of the board that is placed under the cake, and the bottom of the scraper will all the time be touching the working board at all times. That is the key. If you keep that in mind, then your sides of the cake are going to be super straight. Okay, so now hitting the scraper on the working board and then going and hitting the board which is kept under the cake. And now I'm just going to turn the turntable and watch the gap between the sides of the scraper and the cake sides. Now if the scraper is touching any part of the cake, you just need to chop that part of the cake, because you don't want the sides of the cake to be seen as you are going to scrape after applying the whipped cream. So, is my scraper touching any part of the cake? Okay, so this movement, quickly turning the turntable in quite a good amount speed and using the scraper on the sides without lifting it is the key. Okay, so we just follow that. So my cake is not touching the scraper. And now the next step, I have the whipping cream. So we move on to the most important step. So I'm just going to start applying the whipped cream generously on the outside, all through till the top of the cake. So now here one thing you just need to keep in mind, you need to pick up quite a good amount of whipping cream in your hand, now in your scraper basically. If you're going to pick up just a bit, and as you're going to apply it on the sides, if the spatula, the back of the spatula will touch the cake, then you're going to catch up the cake crumbs and put it back into the bowl, and now the entire frosting that you have will catch the crumbs, and that you don't want to do. So all the time pick up the cream from the back of the spatula. So the bent side, this is not the place where you pick. You don't pick your frosting like this and applying like this is not the right way. You always pick from the back of the spatula. So pick it up like that, quite a good amount, be generous, and as you are applying, just make sure you're going back and forth, so your spatula will not touch the cake at all. You'll only be smearing the cream back and forth, right? So I'm just going to go around and then fill the sides completely with the whipping cream. So sides are just completely applied, okay, and then on the top as well. So I'll just add enough on the top, so I don't have to kind of get my spatula touching the cake, or then because but the cake that I have has been layered, so there's just only white whipping cream on top. And in case you're doing on a cake where you have the top layer is just the cake, then you don't want to be catching up the cake crumbs. So the entire cake is just covered with whipping cream. Okay, and now I'm just going to use the scraper. I'm just getting a bowl of hot water. It was very hot at the time I just got it here, and now it's just gotten a bit warm. Okay, so never mind. I'm just going to put the scraper into the hot water. So I'm just going to also pick up some palette knives, set of palette knives, small ones. All of this I'm just going to drop it into the hot water, so they'll just catch up on the heat. Okay, so to start with, I'm just going to pick up the scraper from the bowl of hot water. I'm just going to touch this on the working board and then go and hit the board that we have placed there, and then I'm just going to scrape without lifting the scraper. The scraper has to be on the working board at all times. Like there is going to be quite a bit of excess, and all of this I'm just going to scrape it back into the bowl of whipping cream. And each time I'm just going to remove my hand, my right hand, which is my dominant hand, from the board or from the cake. I will have to scrape it properly, put it in the bowl of hot water, wash it again, and go back to the cake with a clean scraper only. And that is another very important point you just need to keep in mind. And you don't have to wipe this water, dripping the excess should do. And again, most important, I am repeating it again, hit your scraper on the working board and then go hit the board that is placed, the white board that was placed under the bottom of the cake, and scrape it. Now there is going to be quite a bit of excess coming in picture. Each time wash. So the key is to coordinate between your right hand and the left hand. Just start somewhere here and then turn the turntable using your left hand, and the time I am removing the right hand from the cake is when I am able to just stretch the turntable only till that much. So something that you need to avoid at this point is, okay, so hitting the board, and if you're just going to do this, just watch the action. If you're just going to do this, I'm not scraping right now, I'm just telling you something that you need to avoid doing, which is turning the turntable in sections and holding the scraper on the cake. Now let me do and show what's going to happen there. Now if I'm just going to turn the turntable in sections, I'm removing my left hand and keeping it back again and keeping it back again. So what you see there is lines, vertical lines that will just stay there and you wouldn't even know who created that. So you just need to keep in mind, once you're just going to turn the turntable, so the stretch has to be like, if you want to cover up a bigger surface area on the side, then you need to start the left hand, stretch it as much possible and keep the scraper again farther away from you, so you have more surface area. Before taking the left hand away to turn one more time, your right hand should be out of the cake, and that's another important key point you should keep in mind. Okay, so let me do that. You have to watch when I am taking the left hand out of the turntable and when I am taking the right hand with a scraper out of the cake. Okay, so I'm just dipping it into the water. So I'm just turning this as farther away from me as possible, so I'll have more surface area to turn. Okay, so with my left hand on the turntable and the right hand on the cake, so I have removed my right hand first and my left hand is still on the turntable in the same place where I just started turning the turntable. So this is one thing you just need to keep telling yourself when you're removing. Catch yourself when you are removing your left hand from the turntable and the right hand is still there on the cake scraping it, and that is something you need to avoid. So I'm just going to do that again. So right now what I have done is removing the excess because I had added too much cream on the sides, only to just make sure my sides are straight and I will have enough to scrape, and then my sides will be smooth. Okay, so So I'll continue to do that step. So each time I'm done with my left hand turning the turntable, I'll remove my hand from the cake, the one that I have my scraper on. So I just got the water changed, cleaned it up, and now it's quite hot. I'm just going to dip the scraper in the really hot water. Again, it's the same thing. Tap the scraper on the working board, go hit the other smaller board. Okay, now I'm just not going to go like full circles. I'm going to go part by part because I'm just going to watch out on the texture. So each time I just need to get into the bowl of hot water. Now you feel like the surface of the whipped cream is dried up. Then I have another tip that I use. So I have a spray bottle. I'm just going to show, and it's filled with regular water. Okay, now if the surface on the sides you feel like it's dried up as you're scraping, you just use this sprayer bottle to just go on the sides of the cake. Normal temperature water is quite fine as well. Just spray water so it's just not dry anymore, and then we just use the scraper to go around. And that will just get rid of the dry air bubbles that will just be formed. So I'm just going to check the shape, if it is like a proper cylinder, if it needs more scraping. But then each time you can check the scraper is just right on the working board. Okay, so once you have the shape and then you just not having any bigger air bubbles, we just done on the side, so we just move to the top. For the top, to just start with, let me use a bigger spatula. I'm just going to just get in all the excess that's just hanging out. The excess is just good to not keep them on the top of the cake, but just cut the excess and then just scrape it out. Each time clean up. I'm just going to go cut. So if you're just going to spread this inside, then you're always going to have ups and downs. So don't do that. Cut the excess. So I'm just going to level the top. I'll see if the cream on the top is just right enough. So for this, I'm just turning the turntable like quite fast. so the top is leveled. Obviously the sides will get a bit messy with this process where we're just going to have a straight top. Okay, and then I'm just going to go to the sides because you have these hangouts because we've worked on the top, right? And I'm just going to use the scraper to go on the sides one more time. So it's like as you're speeding up, you just take the left hand as many times as you want, as you just turning the turntable like really very fast. And now again it's like a back and forth process. After you just have done the sides, the shape is like proper cylinder, and then you're just going to have this hangout on the top, and then we have to keep cutting, and then in that process if you're going to kind of mess on the top, you're just going to work, but then the amount of excess frosting that will just be pointing on the top and then on the sides each time as you're working on the top and the sides will gradually reduce, and then we'll finally get the sharp edges that we want. So I'm just going to use the small offset spatula again, cut the edge on the top. So you can see the excess that's just been cut out keeps reducing after each iteration. So it's like, you know, there's just a coordination between your right hand and the left hand as you do. So my right hand is going to do this movement while the turntable will turn in the opposite direction. So my left hand will move in this side while my right hand will move on the opposite direction. So it's like you need to coordinate between turning the turntable. So you don't have to have the control entirely on the right hand because it just needs to be like feather touch. As you've come to this stage where you're not supposed to damage the top, you can see this edge is all getting completely clean. You don't even have to go back and work on the top, for which it just needs to be feather touch. You're not going to remove excess of the whipping cream. So just touch the hot water, coordinate. So movement is going to be like this. Okay, so I just go feather touch each time, putting it back in the water, dripping off the excess, and then coming to the cake with a hot spatula which is also wet and dipped in the hot water is important because it just needs to be clean. With a spatula that has some dry cream at the back of it is just going to create more mess on the cake, and you don't want that. So there's the scraper sitting inside the bowl of hot water for me, getting heated up all the time. I'm going to do one more sides. So anytime you find as you're scraping, if the cream gets dried up, you just need to get your water spray bottle and then just spray on the surface and then start scraping again with a hot and a wet scraper again. And then I'm just going to work on the top. So I'm just going to cut the excess on the top. I am having some really hot water here. I'm just going to dip the palette knife, the smaller spatula, into the really hot water, the smaller bowl, and then just go on and then cut the excess. So you can see after cutting, the excess is just getting quite smooth and sharp as well. So here this part I just want to fix it here itself. And cut the excess. So it's just done. I have the sharp edges. I'm just going to turn it around. Usually after you finish, you just need to step back and then just roll and then check the sides if the shape is all proper cylinder and if the edge is all good. You just want to fix. Just always do it with the spatula, and it needs to be wet. You don't wipe it. It's just always dripping the excess, and then in the edge, whatever the rim that forms, you always need to keep cutting the excess. Okay, so that will take a few iterations as you keep doing. So you can just check back on how much excess we had when we started the top, working on the top and the sides like alternatively. So it will just slowly reduce the amount of rim that forms on the edges. Just going to keep cutting, and every time you feel like the water is just cool down and it is not quite hot, you need to keep changing. And then each time you feel like the sides are dried up, then the trick is to use the spray bottle to just go spray around, and then use the scrapers and spatula, hot and wet, to even go touch on the cake. Now I done this entire thing in one entire session, which means I have not put this cake in the freezer to set after I have started to work on the sharp edges, right? But in case you're just getting overwhelmed trying to work on the sides and then the top, and in case you just feel like you just want to pop it in the fridge and then rework on top, the outside would have dried, right? So to continue to work on the sides, you need to take it out of the fridge and then just use the spray bottle to spray water on the sides, and then again use your scraper dipped in really hot water to go around. When even if that is catching up on a lot of air bubbles, then you have no choice but to apply the frosting completely on the sides and then redo the entire process if you think that the dryness is just not going away. But then to keep the whole process to take as less time as possible, it's always better to have the layers frozen. So this process you could just do it in one sitting, so you don't have to juggle between the sides getting dried up quite often, or you just have to deal with the dryness. But in case you have dryness happening, the trick is spray a bottle, spray the water and wet scraper, and use the spatulas whichever is convenient, and the coordination between your left and the right. All this will be the process to end the sharp edges on the whipping cream cake. But then you have to go reiterate yourself on the steps that we did with the size of the working board, the size of the board that we measured to be 1 centimeter bigger than the layers, and it could be 2 centimeter bigger as well, especially for whipping cream cake, because as you're working and we have like this is like 6 layered cake, the weight of the topmost sponge will just weigh down the bottom because we are using sugar syrup. The cakes will be, the sponges will be like really very soft, and the bottommost sponge will just expand, and as you're scraping you're like, I measured the cake to the right size, but then why is my cake coming out of the board? Because of the weight. So for the whipping cream cakes, initially when you start, like the board that I measured the start of this lesson, it could be like even 2 centimeter bigger, so you don't have to fret that as you're scraping the cake is coming out. And then another important thing which I insisted in the beginning of the lesson is to tap your scraper on the working board and then go hit the board that is measured, the white board that's kept under the cake layers, and all the time just remind yourself that you're not lifting and not tilting the scraper that you're using to scrape out the excess cream on the sides, and that will ensure your cake is in a proper cylindrical shape. And for the sharp edges, obviously a few times, a few iterations of back and forth on the edges, cutting the excess and then going back on the sides and then repeating it, as the excess, the rim that is formed will eventually reduce, and then you will start having your sharp edges cake on whipped cream. So with this we come to the end of this lesson, and I'll catch you up to work on something exciting on this cake in the next lesson.